Good morning. Well, it's been a week, right? I've been absent. I've been absent this week. I have. It's been a crazy week. So Monday had a lot to do. Could not be on here at all. Too many things stacked on top of the beautiful schedule, work schedule, and things like that. But it's all good. It's all good. Yesterday I couldn't live stream. Just so you guys know, my mom had back surgery, so I spent the day at the hospital with my dad while she was in surgery. She's doing well. Should be coming home today. So, yeah, life things, just life things, all good. But I wanted to come live today. I wanted to make sure I got a live stream in. So here's the thing. So been a busy couple days already this week. I get to do this today. I can't do it tomorrow. Another big thing's happening in our life tomorrow. I moved my son into college. So going to go place him in his dorm and leave him there. So yeah, it's been a busy week. And you regulars out there, just so you know as well, next week I will not be live streaming. There's a possibility I might get one in on Monday morning. We'll see. I would love to be able to do that. We'll see how my schedule kind of flows. But I got to travel to different offices and different things going on next week, making connections and stuff. So I'll have to start off my day really early next week. So if I have a live stream, it's going to be Monday. If I do not, then it won't be at all next week. So it is what it is. So welcome in, guys. I'm glad you're here. One other thing too, welcome in people on X/Twitter. I actually set up a live stream now to go automatically to that as well. So if you're watching me on X, thank you. Appreciate it. Glad you guys are here. Encourage you guys to chat with me in the chat. Join me, engage with me, talk with me, interrupt me. That's all perfectly fine. I go through news articles specifically in regards to real estate. We talk about just everything from the economy to technology to tips and tricks and things like that for real estate agents. But at the same time, a lot of times it's helpful for even the consumer. A lot of this information might not necessarily be relevant to you, but you can learn kind of a little bit about our industry and help you navigate it if you are buying and selling. So there's a little bit in here for everybody. But I do thank you guys for being here and tuning in. Before we get started, and I'll talk about what I'm going to be talking about today as far as what articles I'm going to be covering in the news. We're going to start off with just a quick snapshot of the interest rates right now. So let's just take a gander at those. So right now, the 30-year fixed rate is 6.79. Yep, it's still kind of high. But that's where we're settled in. A lot of it has to do with the Iranian war and the economy and that kind of stuff. It's down 0.01% since the last report, which I'm not exactly sure when that was ran. This report here was updated yesterday. So your 30-year fixed rate is 6.79, 15-year fixed 6.28. That means your 30-year FHA loan is 6.31 and 30-year VA is 6.32. We're still high, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not the worst it has ever been. But it's still a little high. I actually watched a short TikTok video that kind of popped up on my feed, and the lady was talking about like interest rates versus the actual cost of living, and she was making comparison about like interest rate is only like one factor, and we talk about this all the time here, but she was talking about like one of the factors being that what you don't realize is if interest rates were to go back down to 3%, that doesn't necessarily fix the affordability gap, because when you have low interest rate, then you have this pool of buyers that pull into the market, which drives prices up, which means when prices go up, property taxes go up. When property taxes go up and value goes up, so does your insurance, because your replacement cost goes up. So a lower interest rate does not always, correlate with a good deal. So the longer we stay at 6 to 6.5%, probably the better, because in reality, that balances that market and allows that affordability gap for income to catch back up with itself. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what if you watch what the Fed are trying to do, that is literally the goal here. So that's what we're looking at, 6.79 interest rate. That's where we're sitting at for the 30-year fixed rate right now. All right. What are we going to be talking about today? So this is going to be a different one. This is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about the controversial topic of data centers. Now, the goal for this live stream, though, this one is very specifically just aimed at getting a bird's eye view of this whole entire big argument in regards to data centers, what they are doing to environment, to local subdivisions, and then the necessity for them and what that all looks like. You're welcome to have your opinions on this. I'll probably inject mine here and there, and we'll just kind of throw this out there. I'm going to throw it out into this live stream. We can talk about this, so feel free to interrupt me and throw in your opinions as well. It's perfectly fine. That's the beautiful thing about America. We have freedom of speech. And I know, depending on where you land in your career and your job, is probably where you're going to land on this whole data center thing. So today we are going to be talking about the data centers. We're going to be talking about what they're doing and the effects of those, and in regards to real estate, and get an overall view about what that means. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started with today's live stream, and then we'll jump into these articles. Welcome to the Real Estate Brief. I'm Adam. Today we're going to be cutting through the noise. We're going to get to the truth in the news, look at the data, and I'm going to give you some of my observations and where I believe you can find some opportunity. So if you're ready to gain your real estate edge, let's dive into our first story. And like I said, we're talking about our first story here is going to be an article by Realtor.com. And it's titled, Data Centers Are Moving in Next to American Homes. Here's how neighborhoods are changing. This is going to be the first article we're going to discuss. And I'm going to break this down just as a real estate agent side of it. But then just stay with me, because what we're going to do after this is we're going to go into talking about what data centers are. Like, what is the 101, a beginner's guide to data centers, and what does that mean? And understanding the core concepts about data centers. Then we're going to talk about how the data centers affect, certain environmental economies and communities and that kind of stuff as well. So we're getting into like air quality, water rights, and all this other kind of stuff. And kind of break down kind of the whole big picture about what data centers are doing, the benefits of them and the risks of them. Like I said, we're going to be throwing this out. Opinions are welcome. So leave them in the comments, leave them in the chat, whatever you want to do. It's going to be part of the discussion. So with all that being said, let's jump into the first article here. And this is by Realtor.com, written by Tristan Navarra. Data centers are moving in next to American homes. Here's how neighborhoods are changing. So let's jump into this. All right. It says data centers are increasingly popping up next to American homes, and they're changing neighborhoods in the process. The number of large data centers. Ted DePolia, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that greatly. I probably didn't say your last name right. I apologize, but thank you for the follow. Nonetheless, appreciate that greatly. All right, so the number of large data centers over 50 megawatts, okay? So that's the definition. And matter of fact, when we get into other articles, we're going to be talking about like what is a data center and what is it to define as a large data center. It's 50 megawatts of power kind of going into that facility or more. Has increased sevenfold from 2018, and now U.S. communities host over 350 of them. So this is what's happening. They're starting to move into our territory, starting to move into like subdivision areas, or at least around the outskirts of those areas. And it's causing a major controversy in regards to real estate, in regards to your communities and that kind of stuff. Not surprisingly, the share of home sales near them has doubled, now accounting for 1.5% of all sales. Big number. Data centers have emerged as the hot button issue of 2026. Many cities and states have paused data center developments or incentives amid growing public controversy over their heavy power consumption, noise, environmental pollution, and more lawsuits are pitting the hesitant neighbors against each other. This is absolutely happening. We are seeing this over and over and over. Dominio, good morning to you as well. Thank you for being in here. Appreciate it as always. We are talking about data centers. So just so you know, catch you up. We're going to be talking about data centers. And it's a little bit of a controversial thing, but that's what we're talking about right now is the controversial nature of data centers. And we're going to get into this, but what they are doing is when they move into an area, and we'll talk about this more, is when they move into an area, they absorb a lot of resources. They require water for cooling. They require, they cause ozone layer, yes, let's get mad. Let's get mad. Yeah, I know. Oh, buddy. I tell you, yeah, these controversial issues in this news, it can definitely cause a lot of problems. So, but yeah, there's all kinds of issues around data centers. That is absolutely what's happening here. But then the flip side of that is we need them because of the amount of data and stuff that we're using, especially with AI. So it's this balancing act. How do we address this? Because we are absorbing more and more technology and more AI, and that requires energy. So Where's the give or take, and what do we do about this? Look, I don't like what they're doing to communities. I really don't. But then the other side of this, we're all using, technology. So I don't know. All right. By the end of this year, almost 2% of home sales will be near a big data center. Think about that. 2% of home sales will be near one of these data centers. That's how many. So we're just really kind of getting our idea around about how many of these are going to be. Not because there's more sales activity around data centers, but because there are more data centers in more U.S. communities than ever. I was just talking about this at church the other day with a friend. And data centers and what they are and what they're doing and how they come up and take land and the amount of land is changing the landscape of land purchases and the cost. So it's major impact across the economies, tenfold. In a statement to Realtor.com, the Data Center Coalition, which represents many major developers and users in the industry, said companies operate how they are authorized to do so. All right, so now here is more Americans buy homes near large data centers. Share of U.S. home sales within 5 miles of a facility. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my display. I get in trouble on TikTok sometimes, but I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and just so you guys can see this graph on TikTok. So the share of U.S. home sales within 5 miles of a facility. Look how quickly this graph is rising. This is showing you exactly how many of these data centers are being built. So when you look at this, you look back at 2018. We're not talking about that much time. 2018, we were under 1%. We were almost like 0.7% of them, and now we're at 1.5% with actually within 5 miles of a facility. And then they're projecting at 2.3. So this is a rapidly scaling up amount of data centers that we're seeing here. And this is very fascinating because if this is not regulated or monitored, it's going to drastically change these environments or these communities that these data centers are in. So it makes sense to kind of pay attention to this. And this is very much real estate related, but it's an economical factor that really we need to be throwing out there and talking about. They also follow local ordinances and rules. Director of Virginia Government Affairs for the group. They provided 5.5 million jobs, $204 billion in taxes, and $1.7 trillion in gross domestic product. So here's the part that gets really contentious because these communities, some communities are really wanting these to move in because of those numbers right there. Look at that. 5.5 million jobs are being offered by these big data centers. 2.4 billion in taxes. So look how lucrative that is for states and municipalities to entice them to come to their communities. There are major money being dangled in front of these places to get them to move into their area. It says, quote, data centers are committed to being responsible actors in the localities where they operate. The data center industry takes compliance and accountability seriously and work closely with the many local, state, regional, and federal bodies responsible for permitting and project approvals, environmental regulation, and oversight. And look, I'll give them credit. I've read a couple reports on this, and they are doing all those things. But here is one little thing, is when you have this massive explosion of any kind of industry, a lot of times regulations and things like that need to be implemented to protect certain things haven't had time to materialize yet. So even though they're saying they're doing these things, right now the road to build these data centers is pretty broad. So they're able to come in and build these things, even though they're wanting to comply with it. Those compliance things are very low. The threshold is very low right now. So as this goes up, maybe more regulations and things like that need to happen to protect these communities that they're being built in. And I'm not going to discredit the amount of jobs they're offering and the tax dollars that's going to be poured into those states because there's a lot of benefit there. But these are all the factors. Domino says, when computers started, they filled whole buildings and they quickly became home computers and small servers. We are quickly entering the IBM 5100 era of AI. Bad for data centers. Bankruptcy is coming. Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, buddy, but you're not necessarily wrong. This is that massive amount of growth and trajectory that could lead to those type of things. So yeah, that's a possibility. It really is. Data centers are also moving out to more rural areas. This is true. And they're looking for land. They are going into these rural areas and buying up hundreds of acres of land. And just put into perspective, like what they're willing to pay. When we start talking about the money here, this can drastically change the value and the cost of land in the areas that they buy. They're going in and buying hundreds of acres. And they're spending top dollar because they're going to make their return. So they're going in there and buying. And now some owners of these lands don't want to sell, but then they'll find the one that does, and that overall affects the whole. So It's very interesting to be watching this. And we're at the very early stages of this, per se, but it's ramping up so fast. It says, but overall, the nation's data center output is exploding. In 2015, 50 megawatt plus centers operated in 21 states, drawing a combined 9,600 MWs. As of last year, they're in 26 states and drawing 43,000 MWs. Look at the difference, 96,000 in 2015 and 43,000 in now. So in 26 states versus 21. So again, ramping up crazy. At least 200 more large data centers are under construction now. The typical large data center that opened in 2017 were about 23 miles from the nearest city center. Those that open this year will be about 27 miles from major metro centers, and those planned to open next year will be 34 miles away. That means more large centers in less housing dense places. Those 2017 openings were in areas with about 116 housing units per square mile. That's down to 32 homes per square mile this year. So these things are popping up in rural areas where people are living, and it's drawing the resources from that area. So you can see why this is very contentious. It also means more data centers in lower income communities. The median income in zip codes hosting new data centers was 25% above the national median income in 2023. This year, it will be just below the national median and will farther decline next year. All right, let's go on. Data center impact on home prices. So this is the part we're going to talk about real estate, and then we'll jump into what data centers are and get clarification on the whole bigger picture here, which will help us form our opinions and give us more knowledge about how to actually navigate this in regards to our economy. Data center impact on home prices. The oft-cited fear that data centers could lower nearby home values remains tricky to prove. But the Realtor.com economic research team concluded that so far, home prices near data centers move in line with those that don't have them. After analyzing 43 zip codes, some with new centers and some without, Realtor.com found no statistically significant difference. So not much is changing right there. But again, we're very new in this, so we don't know exactly what's going to happen here. So we just need to keep monitoring this and be very observant and watch these numbers. This is the important thing about stated numbers, guys, is we can miss this historical data metrics that set us in a position to be able to navigate this going forward with our business and our companies. And so paying attention is very, very important. There are some caveats. Realtor.com could only track data centers in 2 years after they opened. In that time, the economic boost from the construction jobs hasn't worn off. And some long-term impacts like electricity prices and noise could take longer to bear out. And the data looks only at states that publicly disclose home sale prices. Texas, one of the nation's most prolific data center developers, isn't in that group. So again, these numbers are going to be skewed because we just don't have all the data to be able to quantify that this is exactly what's happening here. The other big caveat, the data centers that are coming are much larger than those from before. Some of the major data centers are coming to more rural areas that aren't experienced in dealing with developments of this type. And new strains on water supply could create additional problems. This is the thing. You think about water. People just think they need water to, functionability. But when you have so much data being created, that data uses energy, and energy creates heat. And when you generate that much heat, you have to have a way to cool and dissipate that heat quickly. The best source to do that is water. Okay, so that's why they're draining resources of water. That's one of the big things. The data center communities Realtor.com studied have lower residential property tax rates, but those lower tax rates predate the actual data center. So again, to quantify the home value price and people buying those areas, you got to know and kind of see this over time. The property tax rate eased slightly in the studied areas after the center opened, but then rose again later. Why this is the case is difficult to discern. We talked about that. Let's go on down. Yeah, and this is where we get into the regulation part of this, because this is so new that, again, even though the data center companies are saying we comply with all the regulations, environmental cares, the growth of data centers is outpacing regulation. So they're able to grow because the regulation is not in place to check and balance all this. And that's where we kind of have this tension going on. And that's why, as consumers and homeowners that are in areas with these data centers are speaking out and it can be very vocal against this. It's because a lot of times they just have freedom to kind of move quicker than the regulations that would protect their communities. And that's what we're really seeing here. growing attention from elected officials. It says, for politicians, one key to the coming midterms is calming residents' anxiety about data center development. Now, this is the thing. Remember, these are tax dollars we're talking about, so let's put it in perspective. You could agree or disagree. They're going to make some good points that on the surface make logical sense, and maybe they're right. The other side of that coin is again, they benefit from the tax dollars, and how many of these people are actually being affected by the data centers in rural America. So, got to balance it all. In Virginia, Governor Abigail Spanberger pushed for data center developers in the state to be responsible for their own infrastructure costs. Texas Governor Greg Abbott called for a pause in data center development so the state could conduct an audit of the projects in development. He called for them to offset water and power impacts. Meta, OpenAI, and QTS are among those that have already signed on to comply. This is good. I would say if you recognize those companies, Meta's, Facebook, and all that kind of stuff, OpenAI, ChatGPT, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure who QTS is. I might do some research on that. But they are, I applaud them. They are willing to pause, comply with that request. Hopefully they are trying to do this the right way and they have good intentions behind that. Says this, quote, we welcome Governor Abbott's leadership and look forward to working with him to establish clear guardrails for the industry and help ensure all providers operate with a commitment to transparency, accountability, and responsible growth. QTS co-CEOs Tad Greason and David Robbie said in a statement. Dominio, yeah, those two aren't on the same side very often. That's true. That is very true. That is very true. They're hardly ever, right? All right. For data center developers and technology companies, the mission has been to present a willingness to respond. The data center boom is connected to broader anxieties about the advent of artificial intelligence and its other market impacts. Hey, Carter, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that greatly. Thank you for being here. Hope you're getting something of value here. Appreciate it. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg acknowledged the linked anxieties in a 6,500 word open letter he called "The Future is for Everyone, the Path to a Positive AI Future." He likened the data center development boom to the development of the railroads, broadband, and other innovations that turn communities into centers of research, business, and industry, with population and economic growth that follow. Says this, quote, we believe AI infrastructure can play a similar role if it is built with strong community compacts that build durable assets and reasons for the next generation to build and grow their lives there, Zuckerberg said. So anyway, that's the first article. We get a good solid idea about what's kind of, well, it's not solid, but a big broad perspective of the idea about data centers and the effect they have. This is a conversation we're going to probably continue to have because this is ramping up pretty fast. It's not causing effects across every single community, but those that it's affecting, it can be very significant. As of right now, it sounds like a lot of these big data center companies are trying to comply. They understand the nature of this. Mark Zuckerberg making the argument about railroads, that kind of stuff. There is a similar argument to be had there. Like if you really start thinking about like when they built the railroad systems across the nations and across other nations as well, they have to go through and disrupt environmental things to build these tracks and, you know, easement, eminent domain, all those type of things had to happen and railroads had to come through. And it expanded jobs in a lot of markets and allowed us to funnel, you know, and transport materials and stuff across the country. And it's still very effective today. It's still one of the best ways to transfer large product and massive amount of product in a consistent way. So it's a very valuable thing. And we just happen to live in an era where technology requires processing power and it's not slowing down. So to be able to keep up with, I mean, you can even make the argument for other countries. It could get, take the lead in this. We got to keep up with this as well. But then you have to put those guardrails in place that you structure them in a way that doesn't just absorb the resources in a community and then rob it of all its nutrients, but it actually does provide, a benefit for those data centers to be in those areas. If what they're talking about, getting jobs and creation and bringing revenue and even tax dollars, those can be wins for the people that live in those communities. But it does require those guardrails, and it's outpacing the guardrails that are in place, and that's the problem. That's where people are getting upset about. So let's get into actually talking about data centers in general. Again, like I said, I wanted to create an idea about real estate and the data centers and the risk of that to better help us to navigate what this actually looks like. We're going to step out of the real estate arena and we're going to go into just a whole conversation about data centers and the structure of them. And I think it's just going to help myself. I've not read these articles. I just kind of pulled them up because that one article from realtor.com because it's real estate specific. And then I was like, you know what? I really need to get myself more clarification on what's happening here and what this actually looks like before I form an exact opinion. I'm hearing a lot of talk. I'm hearing a lot of people's opinions. So let's begin doing some research and seeing where we land on this. So let's talk about that. So this next article is by DataBank. It's databank.com. I found it just as a way to help us understand some things. This is an old article. This is an article that was written back in May 29th of 2024. But the reason why it makes sense is it's talking about data centers 101, a beginner's guide to understanding the core concepts about what they are. And this will help us understand the necessity of data centers, what they're actually doing and how they operate, and how we actually use them every single second of our lives. Let's jump into it. All modern businesses need access to data centers. Even the most traditional businesses have to make use of online services. Modern businesses, particularly large ones, are highly reliant on data centers. That being so, it makes sense for everybody involved in business to have at least a basic understanding of data centers. With that in mind, here is a beginner's guide to data centers and their core concepts. All right, so let's just talk about this, okay? What is a data center? That's what we're going to be talking about. How boring this might be, who knows? We'll see. A data center is a physical facility that organizations use to store, manage, and process large volumes of data using servers, networking equipment, and storage systems. So all the above, right? If I'm a company and I need to process data, or let's say I want to create a website. Okay, this goes back to hosting servers, right? I used to go out and you go to GoDaddy or whatever, and you pay for server space and you put your website up there and you're storing your website on somebody's hard drive, a server in some kind of facility somewhere else. And you'd pay for that access to that amount of data, okay? That was like the basics in the beginning of what a data center is. Then they morphed into not just being like a hard drive storage space, into actually processing infrastructure. In other words, I am now engaging with those servers to process and bring information about. And we've been doing that even, search results, those type of things. When you do an inquiry, it does a processing power and it sends those things out. Then there's also the networking aspect of it, like a network of computers that are communicating with one another inside of a system, which requires hard drive space as well as processing space. So you really just have to think of these data centers as a one big giant computer with all components of a computer inside. Like if you have your computer here, you have a hard drive. That hard drive stores information. Okay, so it's where you physically store that information. Then you have your processor, which takes that information and processes it from one end to the other. So data centers are doing all these type of things all at once. And as we move into the AI, era, we're needing more and more of those things. Think of it as the backbone of the internet. Every website you visit, every email you send, and every cloud app you use runs through one. Modern data centers are carefully engineered environments with redundant power supplies, cooling systems, and security measures to keep data available around the clock. They range from small server rooms inside corporate offices to massive hyperscale facilities that span hundreds of thousands of square feet. The three most common types are enterprise data centers owned by a single company, co-location data centers, shared space rented to multiple tenants, and cloud data centers. So we got three different types, right? We have one that be like owned by one specific entity for their specific purposes. That's where we're talking about like Meta and OpenAI and Google and those places like that. They own their own data centers. Then you have the one that's a shared space rented by multiple tenants. So think of it as like a multiplex, like in real estate terms, and you go in, you pay a service fee to use X amount of their space in that data center. And then the third one is a cloud data center. In other words, it's like, Dropbox and things like that. Regardless of type, every data center shares the same core mission: ensure your data is always accessible, secure, and protected from failure. What are data centers? It says data centers are facilities equipped with computing and networking resources for storing, processing, and managing digital data. Generally, the term data centers refers to a centralized facility designed to cope with significant volumes of data and advanced data processing. There are, however, also edge data centers. These are small-scale facilities designed for similar processing tasks on lower volumes of data. These data centers are typically situated near where data is generated and or used. This tends to be at the edge of a network, hence the name. Now, this is funny. Okay, this actually makes me think of something here. Bike, hello, my friend. Do you want, yeah, don't spam me. Don't spam me. Sorry, Bike. I appreciate the comment, but I mean, $100, yeah. All right, but here's the thing: is there was actually a whole big thing in my community here, where the community got in an uproar because an article ran on Facebook or whatever talking about, and I think it was our judge executive came out and he said that we are bringing in a new data center, and he didn't clarify what he meant by that, because there's this industrial park that our county has built for industry to come into and build their facilities in. What he was referring to is he didn't use the wrong term, data center. But what he's really referring to is an edge data center. That's what he built. They're building this little teeny building on this industrial park that people that come to that industrial park can then tap into that data center or that edge data center to create internal networks inside of just that industrial park. I mean, it's a small little building. It's not like a data center, but they all heard it and they all went crazy because they're like, oh, we don't want a data center here, because they heard all the negative publicity. But this is not exactly the same thing. So this is, again, why terms matter and why we need to understand this more, because we can get all in an uproar and not have full clarification about what it is we're actually in uproar about. So we need to be doing our due diligence, and that's the importance of this. We want to understand. We want to get information first before forming an opinion. The number of data center and edge sites worldwide expected to reach 3.6 million by 2027, reflecting rapid infrastructure growth. The rise of AI and sustainability regulations is driving innovation in data centers with AI-optimized cooling, microgrids, and modular builds. How data centers are implemented. Some data centers, both traditional and edge, are owned and run by the organizations that use them. These days, however, it is increasingly common for organizations just to buy access to data center infrastructure, and that's what we're tending to see more of right now. We're going to jump on down. Components of the data center. Here are the 5 main components of data centers. So now let's get an understanding about the actual core components. Like I said, it's like a computer, okay? It's got all the components of a computer. What do we have? Servers. Servers execute computational tasks, host applications, and store data. Data centers often deploy various types of servers, including what they call rack servers. That's like where you put them in a rack and there's multiple servers in that. You have blade servers, and you have specialized servers optimized for specific workloads. Think government officials, think encryption, or think about a specific task noted to maybe a big project that's going on by a company and they need X amount of space, and that server is allocated for just that. Then you have networking equipment. Networking equipment facilitates connectivity between servers, devices, and users. Data centers usually invest in the best networking equipment available at any point in time. For example, currently data centers will use fiber optic cabling and 5G mobile networking as much as they can. So what could I do? So give this in some context here. What I would do is, let's say I have a multi-million-dollar company and I have multiple sites around the United States. But I want all those computers to be connected inside of their own network. I, as an owner, could go out and invest in all my own network equipment. Or I could contract with a networking equipment data center that puts all of my computers and all of my communications and all my offices inside of their facility on its own dedicated server and its own dedicated network. So that way they're all communicating. So that's a service that they offer. So you can see the importance of this. Think of like banks and things like that. They can go out and invest in massive amount of technology to do this type of thing, but they don't have to because these data centers are doing that. So again, another reason why these data centers are gaining popularity. Then we got the normal one, storage systems. Data centers typically utilize a variety of storage systems for different purposes. For example, hard disk drives may be used for slow access storage. Think file management, storing, that kind of stuff. Solid state drives will be used for fast access storage. Let's say I need to do some kind of recall or temporary saved files when I'm actually working on a document or a graphic design or a video. It will save on a solid state drive. Many data centers implement storage area networks, which is called SANs, S-A-Ns, enable centralized storage provisions and management, facilitating efficient data storage and retrieval. And then power infrastructure. Power infrastructure provides the electrical power necessary for data centers operations. So this is one of the biggest contentions. When they come into an area, they absorb so much electricity that they're driving the cost of electricity up in those areas because they are electricity drain. They just suck the grid. Now, a lot of the regulation that I've been reading about in regards to the drain of power to keep the amount of power they're absorbing to increase costs for all people in the area. Hey, thank you, Jared 2007 for the follow. Appreciate that greatly. Thank you for being here. Awesome. Hello to you. So to keep those electrical costs from being absorbed by all the consumers and the community, what a lot of these regulations are doing, they're actually encouraging or changing their policy that data centers have to pay a higher premium for their energy. That way, they're actually absorbing the cost of that energy production and not affecting the local community. So that's one of the regulations that I'm seeing across multiple states. So we're starting to see this. But right now, there are a lot of areas where they're drawing off the power grid. And because of that draw, it's causing all electrical bills to go up in those communities. And those people in those communities have a right to be upset, right? Climate control infrastructure. Although the equipment used in data centers has become more energy efficient over the years, it still generates a lot of heat. And this is what I was talking about. This is when you're producing this much energy and you're using that much energy and you're dissipating that through the processing and the storing of information, it's producing a lot of heat. You got to figure out a way to dissipate that. And one of the most effective ways is through water. Okay. This means that data centers need robust cooling systems. They also need systems to manage humidity, as excess moisture can seriously damage equipment. Data centers play multiple roles in IT infrastructure. Here are 5 of the main. Okay, so they didn't mention that here, but water is the other source. And again, just like with electric, it's driving those costs up in certain areas. So that's what's happening here. That's another one of those complaints, but it needs those things. The role of data centers in IT infrastructure, we're talking about data storage, data processing, connectivity, security and compliance, disaster recovery, and business continuity. That's all of these things. Then you also have uptime. Data centers are core to business operations. You go into a data center, you contract with a data center because you want the guarantee of having the uptime. If I was to store something on my hard drive here locally, and I needed access to that as a company immediately, if I lose power here, I'm out. So if I'm doing major complex situations, think like US stock exchange, right? They cannot have downtime. So a lot of them are outsourcing to these data centers. So there you go. That's what a data center is. That is the premise behind data centers. Now let's talk about the environmental ways that data centers can affect local communities, because this is the whole thing. We started off with Realtor.com's whole news article talking about data centers, the effects that it's having on real estate, what it actually means, getting a bird's eye view. You guys can go back and watch that. We then just did an article review about what data centers are, specifically, how do they function? What do they do? Now we're going to jump into the environmental effects about data centers. So this is all going to help us build a narrative to get enough information to be able to come up with our own opinions and also talk, with education behind us to understand how these things actually work, and ultimately help us navigate this going into the future. And so when we start hearing about, legislation and stuff being proposed, we'll be a little bit more informed and ready to kind of engage with that. And I encourage you to do so. This is a very new industry in regards to the radical expansion of it. And we need to be very informed about the consequences of not being educated with it and what it actually means for our economy going forward. Just so you guys know, all these articles that I'm covering today are in the show notes of my description on YouTube. So you guys can go there and check it out. You can search for on youtube.com, the Real Estate Advantage. You'll see a picture of me. That would be the right thing. Go into the live tab, find today's video, and you'll see the links there. Sorry, it's a little bit of a long journey. While you're there, and if you're watching me now, please consider subscribing, guys, or follow me on TikTok. I greatly appreciate that. It always helps. I'm wanting to build that community. I want to build a community of real estate agents or consumers that are really interested in real estate and giving them practical advice to help them in their business. All right. With that being said, let's go into our final article here. This one is by World Resources Institute. So they're a research firm that go through there and just a bunch of insights into what's going on. So this one here is an explainer article, and it says, from energy use to air quality, the many ways data centers affect U.S. communities. All right. Energy prices and water use aren't the only ways data center affect U.S. communities. We break down the impacts and how some states are dealing with them. This is by Carla Walker and Ian Goldsmith, February 17th, 2026. Okay, so it's been a little while, but it's still a very relevant article. AI tools like ChatGPT, navigation apps, think about like Google Maps and Apple Maps and all those type of things. They're constantly using data centers, guys. So this is the thing, is like we want to complain about data centers and the effects of them, but we use them in every aspect of our life every single day. If your phone is on right now, you're using a data center. If your computer's running right now, you're using a data center. Okay. And we're getting more and more of these type of things. Everybody's using GPSs. Guess what? They're processing that through data centers. Yet the infrastructure behind them is anything but invisible. Across the country, a surge of new data centers is reshaping local energy grids, water systems, and land use. These are the three factors that the everyday consumer or the everyday homeowner and property owner is experiencing, and those in the community. Across the country, a surge of new data centers is reshaping. Rising power bills and rampant water use tend to be the top of mind. Yet it's increasingly clear that data centers will have impacts far beyond this, with real implications for communities' well-being. While the rise in the data center is all but inevitable, the way it happens is not. Data centers power modern life and can bring both investment and jobs. So that's the benefit, right? It does do that. And this is the new way of employment. When we start talking about all the different things that are going on where AI is taking jobs away, this is part of creating that new job era. All right? Like electricians and things like that. And there's an industry here. While the rise in data centers has all been inevitable, data centers power modern life and can bring clear rules on energy procurement, water use, land siting, community engagement, and cost recovery will determine whether this growth strengthens local economies and infrastructure or shifts risks to residents. And this is where I'm saying, like, this data center production is ramping up, but that regulation stuff is still behind. So we got to address this. The U.S. data center boom. Data centers are the physical infrastructure of the internet. They house the servers, network and equipment, and supporting systems such as cooling, power, backup, fire suppression, and security that keep digital services running reliably. Data centers first emerged in the mid-20th century and proliferated during the 1990s alongside the rise of the internet. But today's expansion is unfolding at a much larger scale and faster pace than ever before. It's fueled by billions of dollars in private investment, state tax incentives, and federal directives aimed at fast-tracking permitting. These policies are prioritizing large AI-related facilities in a bid to strengthen U.S. competitiveness. Everything they're saying is absolutely true. And when you start talking about foreign powers and the ability for them and what they're trying to do, we have to respond in some way. Because if we don't do this, if we don't produce AI and keep up with this, this could be a national risk. It could be an absolute national risk. Our enemies out there and cybersecurity and things like that and cyber, attacks is ramping up. So even on that side of things, we've got to address it and we've got to maintain pace. But we need to do it with maturity and transparency. These facilities can take many forms, ranging from small server rooms inside of office buildings to massive standalone campuses the size of hundreds of football fields. This last category, often known as hyperscale data centers, has drawn particular attention thanks to their size, rapid growth, and substantial impacts on local communities. There were just over 3,900 data centers across the United States as of late January, nearly 37% of the world's total. Yet market trends suggest that hyperscale development is highly concentrated in just a few regions. These areas function as national hubs for cloud and AI infrastructure, hosting a disproportionate share of large-scale facilities relative to their size. It says Virginia, often described as the data center capital of the world, hosts the largest number of facilities, followed by Texas and California. So there's your three states right now. Together, the top 10 states account for roughly 60% of all data centers nationwide. All right, now let's talk about this. What does it do? How does it actually affect communities and how are governments responding? Okay, a data centers multiply across the country, so do their impacts. We examined 7 ways this growth is reshaping local conditions and looked at emerging governance practices that can help manage trade-offs. Number 1, managing soaring energy demand. We talked about this. That's the biggest consumption that it does. As technology advances and computing demand grows, data centers are becoming increasingly energy hungry. A single modern AI data center can use as much power as 100,000 homes. Oh my gosh. That's insane amount of power. Many of the larger ones now being built are expected to consume up to 20 times that amount. Estimates of total future power demand from data centers vary significantly. One study from the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory found that data centers could represent up to 12% of all U.S. electricity consumption by 2028. Up to 12% of all consumption. And if it keeps ramping up, it's just going to keep going higher and higher because we're using it for more and more things. All right. This adds to concerns about rising power bills across the United States. 2025 saw over $60 billion worth of rate increases countrywide, with Americans paying almost 10% more for electricity on average compared to 2024. The reasons for these rate hikes are complex and variable. This article is being very fair and balanced here, in my opinion. However, there's evidence that the need to procure and build new energy infrastructure for data centers contributed to price increases in at least one region, the Mid-Atlantic. Other regions could see the same if safeguards aren't put in place. This is the thing, safeguards. We need something like that. And this is going to go into what I think is where I just talked about. Many states and utilities are exploring ways to ensure that data centers can come online without shifting costs to other ratepayers. Last year, utility AEP Ohio introduced a new rate schedule for data centers requiring them to pay for at least 85% of energy they are subscribed for, regardless of how much they actually use. So again, this is where I was talking about, like, where regulation is going to help absorb these costs to avoid it putting an impact on the actual local residents. Other states like Oregon, Minnesota, and Missouri have required utilities to create new billing classes and rate structures for large energy users so that their costs aren't shared by household and businesses. Number 2, protecting local water supplies. We talk about this again. I'll read this brief statement. We'll move on. Data centers require huge amounts of water to keep servers cool enough to function. Mid-sized facilities can use up to 300,000 gallons of water a day, while large facilities can consume as much as 5 million gallons a daily. Comparable to what a small town uses, recent estimates project that by 2028, AI-related data centers in the U.S. could require up to 32 billion gallons of water annually. This is enough to support roughly 360,000 households' indoor water use. So again, same exact kind of draw. When these data centers come in, they are absorbing electricity and water. But again, same as the electric, these same water municipalities are doing the same type of thing where they're starting to adjust and having different tiers for different types of consumption. Therefore, the data centers are probably paying a higher premium. It's not that way across the board, though, but that's the goal. So you can see how regulation could help. Number 3 is reducing air pollution and climate impacts. Data centers need a constant and reliable power supply. Many facilities rely on gas-fired generation for routine operations alongside diesel generators for emergency backup. Both come with climate and health risks. So again, we know how gas emissions, those type of things happen. So there needs to be that Clean Air Act, and that stuff needs to be in place. They need to revisit that in regards to what this looks like, and then overall research to see what kind of air pollution we're talking about out of these data centers. We can get into all kinds of numbers here. We're going to skip down just for time's sake. Go back and read this. Mitigating noise. This is another one. Is data center construction, rooftop cooling systems, and backup generators can be disruptively noisy. Smaller diesel generators reportedly reach 85 decibel levels that can harm hearing. Larger industrial units can approach 100 decibels, equivalent to a motorcycle or jackhammer. So think about that being really close to a subdivision, that kind of stuff. That could be, stressful, which would then cause people to move away and maybe even leave the community these data centers are in. That could massively have an effect on that community. All right, number 5, addressing competition for land. This is where we're going to get into the real estate aspect of this. Massive data centers are reshaping how land is used in many communities. In 2024, the average data center site covered about 224 acres. That's a lot of land they're looking for. And that's why they're going to rural areas. You know, I had a whole conversation like, why don't they just buy in industrial parks and that kind of stuff? They can't. There is not industrial parks for them to move into with 224 acres. So they're going out into the rural parts of the country and buying land there. Or 0.35 square miles, roughly the size of 450 football fields, just to put it in perspective. This represents a 144% increase since 2022. Developers are increasingly seeking large parcels for multi-building campuses that allow for phased construction and future expansion. Hyperscale facilities require even more land. Okay, remember we talked about the term hyperscale? It's a much larger facility with largest campuses exceeding 1,000 acres or about 1.6 square miles, according to a recent report from the Wisconsin Farm Bureau. A lot of land. This often intersects with agricultural and rural land uses. Think about that. The land that used to harvest crops and animals are being absorbed by these data centers. What kind of impact will this have on us? Some local governments are exploring policies to treat data centers as a distinct land use, steer developments away from prime farmland, and apply additional reviews to large-scale projects. These approaches can include strengthened agricultural zoning and implementing performance standards to address buffering, traffic noise, and long-term site management. So again, here's the problem. What's the solution? This article is kind of giving us a little bit of an idea about both. Number 6, reducing pressure on marginalized communities. Emergent analysis suggests that some data center siting patterns could compound long-standing environmental and economic challenges. A national review of roughly 700 data centers across the country found that nearly half are in a census tracts with above median environmental burdens, such as air pollution, park access, and water pollution. As measured by the Center for Disease Control's Environmental Justice Index, many were located in areas with social vulnerability indicators, such as poverty and lower educational levels zones. State-level assessment shows similar concerns. In California, existing and planned data centers appear more frequently in areas of high air pollution. In South Carolina, new facilities and the fossil fuel generation built to power them are often sited near Black and low-income communities. More research is needed to fully understand these trends, yet preliminary findings underscore the importance of ensuring that new data center development does not reinforce existing inequities. So something to follow. I mean, these are all impacts. And then finally, number 7, balancing economic trade-offs. It says this: data center development can create real economic opportunities. Their construction generates hundreds of well-paying, though temporary, jobs for technicians, electricians, and other local building trade workers. There are also good paying opportunities for full-time staff like technicians, security staff, and facility managers. At Google's data center in Central Ohio, salaries range from about $74,000 for a data center technician to more than $160,000 for an operations manager. Yet, these positions are fairly limited. A review of more than 1,200 U.S. data centers found that even the largest employ fewer than 150 permanent workers, and sometimes as few as 25. These are just data centers. They don't need a lot of people walking around. The data center is doing all the work. You don't have to somebody walk around. So it's got employment and decent pay, but not very many jobs. And then it goes on about what governments can do. We have hashed this out like crazy today. Hopefully, though, that the goal of this is not necessarily to just insert our opinion immediately, but it's to take a step back and absorb the information and let it process and simmer, if you will, for just a little bit and understand what's actually happening here. Arguments on both sides, right? It's easy for us to kind of take a position and be like, no to data centers. I don't want them in my community and that kind of stuff, but I want to keep using my phone. I like ChatGPT, right? I like my websites. I like watching YouTube, right? It's like we can kind of join on different bandwagons and kind of not be fair to the whole industry. So the problem is that's not going to happen. People are still going to be consuming content, still using technology, more and more at a rapid pace. You've got electric cars that are using more AI involved. I mean, you got tons of stuff that's draining this informational age, right? So something needs to happen there. And data centers right now is the only solution to handling that kind of processing data. Then the flip side is you have all this governmental stuff going, or all this environmental stuff going on, the drain on the community and the effects of land use. That's a valid concern. It's an absolute valid concern. So we have to balance this and look at this objectively and really kind of take a step back and see what's actually happening here and dig into the weeds a little bit more. So hopefully today, even though this is a real estate show, hopefully today we got a better understanding about data centers and the effects they have overall. That was the goal. And I hope that we delivered on that. Guys, I do thank you for being here. I got to wrap up. It was a good show. It's a little bit different, than it normally is. But I feel like this is a good conversation to have now. I wanted to get this out there so it can be another story that we're tracking and we can be talking about here on this channel. So I appreciate you guys being here as always. And like I said, I will not be live streaming tomorrow. I got to take my son, move him into college. So I will be on the road. Next week, my goal is to maybe do a live stream Monday morning. We shall see. The rest of the week, I will be on the road as well, visiting some offices and going around the state and doing things I got to be doing. So I will not be able to be in my office to be able to do live streaming next week. Maybe Monday, possibly Monday. But regardless, stay in the news, guys. Stay informed. Don't let up on reading and understanding data and metrics and the news and that kind of stuff. Because over time, you're going to find a very strong narrative. And that strong narrative is going to help you navigate any kind of shift or change that might be happening in our industry. And it's very, very important to stay in this news. So anyway, with all that being said, I appreciate you guys being here. I thank you for your time. I do not take that for granted. You took time out of your day to come in here and listen. My goal here is make sure that I'm providing something of value back to you guys. Hopefully you've done that. If I have, please share this to a friend that might need to hear some of this information. And obviously consider subscribing and following and all that kind of stuff. That is your real estate brief for today. If you did find this helpful, please consider hitting the like button to tell YouTube you'd like to see more of this type of content. Consider subscribing to join a community of real estate agents that are focused on building a business that is relationship focused first. There's always more I can be talking about. Ran out of time. We'll see you on the next live stream. Take care, guys. Appreciate y'all greatly. Have a great rest of your week.